The socialist government of Colombia volunteered to be the first country humiliated by Donald Trump's unwillingness to let America get walked on by every random country on Earth. The beef kicked off when Colombia refused to accept their own criminal aliens on a repatriation flight, suggesting Colombia had not, in fact, been sending their best, but this also violates long-standing arrangements that countries have to accept their deported criminals. Trump, in between golf holes, informed Colombia's socialist president he would be imposing sanctions and tariffs potentially hitting 50%. In response, as ex-user Maze Moore put it, the president of Colombia wrote a dissertation on the history of his country and his bloodline and how it would be impossible for him to ever back down. 1 hour later, he did back down, after Trump had tariff legislation drafted for the House and Senate and posted a FAFO meme for good measure. Now, Colombia was dumb to pick the fight in the first place, not only because refusing their own criminals is bad form, but because Colombia needs the U.S. one heck of a lot more than the U.S. needs Colombia. For starters, in the past 8 years, Colombia's gotten about $800 million a year in U.S. aid, but the real dependence is, of course, trade. So Colombia exports roughly 7% of their GDP to the U.S., with the U.S. making up 41% of all of Colombia's exports. That means roughly 3 million Colombians feed their family by exporting to the U.S. things like flowers, bananas, spices, and, of course, coffee. For the U.S., meanwhile, Colombia is just 0.8% of exports, so it is noise. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos how this inequality is pretty much true for every country on Earth, where the U.S. market is existential for them, but their market is noise to us. That means that Colombia will lose any trade war with the U.S., Canada or Europe will lose any trade war, never mind Japan or Korea. Even China needs us much more than we need them. So to illustrate, our 3 biggest trade partners are Canada, Mexico, and China. Mexico's exports to the U.S. make up over a third of their economy, meaning roughly 45 million Mexicans are fed by U.S. consumers. But our exports to Mexico are just 1.3% of GDP. Canada's almost as bad. Exports to the U.S. are over 1/5 of their entire economy, so about 8 million Canadians are fed by Americans. But our exports to Canada are just 1.4% of our economy. Even for China, we export just 1/4 what they export to us as a share of the economy. So about 1 million jobs in the U.S. are producing for export to China, while 20 million Chinese jobs depend on exports to the U.S. When you tally it up, it's rather shocking that the U.S. gets pushed around at all. We are the ones with the leverage. And Trump is the first president since, Teddy Roosevelt to see that. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. We're barely a week into Trump, and he's already rearranging the global order. The world has been happy to take advantage of our globalist generosity, so access to our markets, our tech, our unpaid mercenary services, all for nothing in return. In fact, the closer our alleged friendship, the more abusive they've been. Trump is ending that. More important, once it's gone, the globalists will have a very hard time taking us back to America last. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.